So my name is Brianna Bowman. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. I am the National Farmer Training Network Manager at the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project located in Massachusetts. I'm joined by my colleague Kristen Aldrich. She's the National Programs Manager at New Entry, and also joined by Rachel Santo and Karen Bassarab, who are with the Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Futures Food Policy Networks and are co-hosting this webinar today. We have a great agenda in store for you all. We'll start with a framing of why this topic is of importance, especially at this current moment, as well as an opportunity to hear from our webinar hosts. So you'll hear from myself, Kristen, Rachel, and Karen about the programs that we operate. And then we'll move right into our presentations, beginning with Sydney Daigle and Kim Rush-Lynch from the Prince George's County Food Equity Council. They'll be followed by Eric Sannerud from the Central Minnesota chapter of the National Young Farmers Coalition, who is also the CEO of Mighty Axe Hops. And we'll finish with a presentation from Annie Heuscher, the Program Director of the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition of Missoula County. Each of our speakers today is going to be focusing on how their work centers the needs of beginning farmers and creates conditions favorable to the success of new farm business. The reason why this is so important is probably no mystery to many of you. We need new farmers and we need communities that are prepared to support them. As many of you know, farmers are aging out of the profession and fewer young farmers are entering it. The last ag census, taken in 2012, showed the average age of principal farm operators at over 58 years old, and this continues a 30 trend of steady increase in the age of primary farm operators. In addition to this, we see farmers aging out of the profession and fewer new farmers entering. So the ag census also showed that there were 20% fewer beginning farmers than in 2007. Just a side note, the 2017 ag census, I believe they're still collecting responses. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but a good opportunity to be counted in this, and particularly if you're working with new and beginning farmers. So as we see farmers aging out with fewer people to replace them, what this means is that land which in an ideal world would be turned over to the next generation of farmers is currently being farmed without an identified successor. And what this means is that the future of family farming on these lands is in jeopardy and that the security of local food systems is compromised. So we move in to this webinar, acknowledging that in light of these trends, that NIFTI believes that shaping communities that support the success of beginning farmers should be a priority of food systems work nationwide. And we will have the opportunity to hear from folks who are helping support farmers and their businesses by providing them with the things that they need besides soil, seeds, sun, and water to succeed. So I myself and my colleague Kristen are part of an organization that serves beginning farmers on the ground, but also does a whole array of other things. We work for the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project in Massachusetts, founded in '98, which offers capacity building programming, farmland and infrastructure resources, market access, and national networks, all in support of new farmers. To talk more specifically about what I do, I manage the National Incubator Farm Training Initiative. So NIFTI was started in 2012, and since then has provided one-on-one consulting, resources, and events in support of the professional development of incubator farm project staff nationwide. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the incubator farm model, an incubator farm project is a land-based multi-grower project that provides training and technical assistance to aspiring and beginning farmers. There are over 100 operational incubators in the United States and over 200 projects that are either in development or affiliated with some kind of educational institution. So in support of incubator farm projects, as I mentioned, we offer free technical assistance from a network of incubator TA providers across the country. We also manage a regional and national listserv and host community of practice events including the NIFTI National Field School, which is a professional development event for the staff of beginning farmer training projects. That's taking place this November in Pacific Grove, California. And then lastly, we support projects through a webinar series, of which this is number 15, and maintaining a resource library which hosts training materials for program design and implementation. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass the mic over to Kristen, and just 1 second here. Kristen, you should have the presenter privileges now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bree. So again, my name is Kristen Aldrich with New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. I hope everyone can hear me all right. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other national programs and projects that New Entry has going on now, and in particular, the support that we provide for the Community Food Projects Grant Program. So New Entry received a grant from the USDA, a Training and Technical Assistance Grant, in order to support applicants and grantees of the CFP program. Through that support, we are able to provide resources, materials, conduct webinars and trainings, and otherwise provide one-on-one assistance for folks that are interested in the Community Food Projects Grant Program to help with the application process, and also to help grantees, once they have received an award, with the implementation of their project. So my name and email are listed here. If anyone has further questions, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the support we provide for CFP, what that grant program is all about, in case folks may not be familiar, and then how that connects back to the topics and themes of this webinar today. So as you may know, the Community Food Projects Competitive Grant Program is a program of the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and it's a program that started in '96 to fight hunger and promote self-sufficiency in low-income communities. The goals of which being meeting the food needs of low-income individuals, increasing the self-reliance of communities and providing for the food needs of those communities, promoting comprehensive responses to local food access, farm and nutrition issues, and meet specific state, local, or neighborhood food and agricultural needs. So those are the goals as stated in the RFA as of last year. You know, I think we can all see how this fits in well with sort of combining the efforts of food policy councils and beginning farmer training. So I just wanted to point out a few aspects in which those connections can be made, and just to point out that this could potentially be an appropriate grant program to apply if you are indeed either an incubator farm training program or you work with food policy councils. There could be, you know, financial funding support through this grant program to support what it is that your project and your program is doing and the good work that you do in your community. So again, there's a great emphasis in the CFP program on collaboration. They always want to see how the applicant for a CFP grant is working with the communities that are being served, and see how the targeted residents and organizations and people that might be served by a community food project grant were involved in the planning and would be engaged in its implementation. So the collaboration between a beginning farmer training program and a food policy council, in fact, is one of the collaborations that's highlighted within the RFA as of last fiscal year's RFA release. Additionally, the community engagement piece is incredibly important as well, really making sure that input is received from the people within the community that one of these grant projects might be serving. And in addition, when they speak about eligibility requirements, one area that they highlight is if the project is focused on job training and business development activities for food-related activities in low-income communities. So that would be directly applicable back to a beginning farmer training program. So again, just wanted to highlight some of these areas where this could indeed be a great funding source potentially for your project or program. In terms of the CFP RFA to be released this coming year, it all appears to be on track. I haven't received additional confirmation, but from the folks that we work with at CFP and NIFA, they do seem to be on track to release the RFA this year around the same time as they do historically, which would be in the fall. It's typically been around mid-October. So again, if it is something that might be a good fit for your project or organization, feel free to reach out to me and to us at New Entry, and we would be happy to help with different aspects of your application and answer questions that you might have. So that's my brief plug about CFP and the help that we can provide. And with that, I'll be passing the presenter ball over to Karen Bassarab with the Food Policy Network.
Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, Brianna. We wanted to start off by saying thank you to New Entry Sustainable Farming Project for approaching us about this webinar. We're really delighted to be talking with you today and providing an introduction on food policy councils and some of the ways that they can get involved in supporting new and beginning farmers through their work as multi-stakeholder coalitions. So we'll start with just giving you an introduction of who we are and then talk a little bit about what a food policy council is, and then we'll turn it over to those that are actually in the field doing the work. So I'm a program officer with the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and the CLF is an interdisciplinary center located at the Bloomberg School of Public Health in Baltimore. Joining me in the room, listening to this webinar as well, are two other members of the center, Rachel Santo and Ann Palmer. Our work focuses on the intersection of diet, environment, food production, and public health. Our education program includes a food systems certificate, food systems coursework, curriculum development, and support of doctoral fellowships. We conduct research, support other faculty members' research, and collaborate with other research institutions. We do this through 4 program areas, one of those being the Food Policy Networks Project. The goal of the Food Policy Networks Project is to build the capacity of food system stakeholders to reform local, state, regional, and tribal food systems through effective public policy. We do this work through trainings, technical assistance, sharing best practices, networking with other food groups and leaders, and developing and providing food policy resource materials. As you can see on this slide, we have a number of resources that you can plug into through this network to learn about food policy councils and food policy. We have a listserv with about 1,200 subscribers, a directory of all the councils across the nation. So after you listen to this webinar, if you're interested in seeing if there's a food policy council in your community that you can connect with to start talking about beginning farmer issues, you can go to our Food Policy Council directory. We also have a listserv, which is a way for members to communicate with one another about issues that they're facing in their communities. And so if you're working on a project and you want some advice, you can go to that listserv and post a question. We do moderate it, so it's not an overwhelming number of emails that you get a day in your inbox. So our main audience for the Food Policy Networks Project are food policy councils. And food policy councils are multi-stakeholder coalitions that get together to work on some dimension or aspect or issues within their local food system. Food policy councils operate at local, state, regional, tribal levels. So they're all different jurisdictions in which they focus. Their issues are also very broad and varying. They also vary in the number of members that they have and the structure of the councils. So we say that there is no one-size-fits-all model for a food policy council, but each of them have a focus on some work in systems, and focusing on new beginner farmer issues is one of those areas that they can work on. So food policy councils, they function as a food systems planning venue or a department of food. They bring together members from all different varieties of backgrounds and sectors across the food system. They can focus on health, planning, economic development, a lot of varied issues and areas that impact the food system. And they do this in order to be able to address regulations, budgets, legislation, programs, administrative issues, any sort of policy issue that affects their food system. They're coming together to try and work on how to solve that issue. And they also serve as a voice for the community. Through this multi-stakeholder coalition, these members come together and talk about issues, and they can elevate those issues to the larger, broader public. Food policy councils, as the slide before showed, have a variety of sectors that are involved in them. This graphic just shows you kind of the range of sectors and organizations and entities that can be members of a food policy council. They vary from public health to local businesses to farmers, and the size of the councils also varies depending on the region and the issues that they're facing. Food policy councils also work on a variety of issues, from access to healthy food to farm to institution to farmers markets and food processing. This list is just kind of a brief list of the priority areas that they can focus on. There are many other areas, and they also don't necessarily work on all of these areas all at the same time. In the United States, or in North America, we survey councils once a year in the U.S. and Canada, and this chart shows you kind of the rise in the number of councils across North America. In the U.S., there are over 260 councils that are either active, in transition, or in development at this point. And as you can see, they've kind of plateaued since last year, but since 2010, we've seen a drastic increase in the number of these councils working at a local level or at a state level. So again, if you're interested in learning if your community has a food policy council, our directory on our website, which is foodpolicynetworks.org, you can find out if there's one in your area and get in touch with them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sydney Daigle and Kim Rush-Lynch, who are with the Prince George's Food Equity Council, to talk about their work on new beginning farmer issues in Maryland.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, my name's Sydney Daigle, and I'm the director of the Prince George's County Food Equity Council. I'm joined today by Kim Rush-Lynch, so I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Hi, as Sydney mentioned, I'm Kim Rush-Lynch, and I'm the Ag Marketing Specialist with University of Maryland Extension in Prince George's County, as well as the co-chair and founding member of the Food Equity Council.
Today, Kim and I are going to share some of the strategies we've used to incorporate new and beginning farmers and their priorities into our Food Policy Council structure and work, and a few of our relevant policy accomplishments. I want to start by sharing a bit of background about our county and its farming community. Prince George's County is fairly large. We have over 900,000 residents, and we're located directly to the right of DC. So we're a fairly urban county. Our founders were intentional about calling us a Food Equity Council when we launched, as there were and there are still reasons to be concerned about health inequities and injustices in access to healthy foods in our county. About a third of our county's land is rural, but approximately 3/4 is zoned for agricultural use, and I'll talk a little bit about why later. We have diverse types of farming operations in the county, ranging from commodity crop growers to permaculture forest farms, to dairies, small livestock farms, and wineries. Our council launched 3.5 years ago, and we're independent of county government. It's important to note that before we launched, our county council endorsed our formation through a resolution. This was really critical, as it gave us credibility in the county before we got started, and it made key decision makers aware of who we were and what we intended to do as far as food system change went. Kim will go into more detail on our structure and work groups a little bit later on in the presentation. Farmers have been engaged with our council from the beginning planning stages. We have a variety of members from the agricultural community, including diverse farmers and agricultural service providers. You can see some of our founding farmers listed in the right-hand corner of the screen. We've heard from stakeholders in our fairly urban county that land access to funding, navigating permitting and licensing, and finding new markets were challenging for new and beginning farmers, and we felt that our policy work had a positive impact in those areas. We also knew when we launched that it's important to work on our county's urban farm legislation and farmland preservation. Our county's urban farm legislation was extremely restrictive, and we knew that farmers were feeling the pressure of development on their farmland. Finally, we knew that we needed to attract and support beginning farmers, as the average age of our farm operators in the county is even higher than the national average. It's 60.4 years old. Now I'll hand it over to Kim to share some more information about our council structure and farmer focus work group.
Thanks, Sydney. The Food Equity Council is structured so that our members serve on work groups. And this is where a bulk of our work gets done. Our members sit alongside residents and also other professional stakeholders to come up with strategies and make decisions about the direction of the work. We have 3 work groups. And we're going to talk about one work group in just a moment. And these work groups research and develop action plans for specific food and farm policies. For 3 years, we had a local food production work group that focused on many issues beginning farmer space. That work group has since transitioned into Grow Food and Preserve Farmland, which focuses on issues like land and capital access, as well as farmland preservation. Currently, we're working on revitalizing a formal county committee that would support farmers' economic development interests, as well as strengthen our right to farm legislation. And this legislation also includes a conflict mediation subcommittee. We're also collaborating with county agencies such as the Soil Conservation District, of course, Extension, our local park and planning office, permitting and regulatory agencies, including our health department. Frequently, we work with our county council and local farm bureau chapter to address farmer concerns and also to support new and beginning farmers in the county through policy and regulatory change. Based on an identified need for affordable land, our future plans include partnering with our park and planning department to launch a farmer incubator on parkland. Next thing I'm going to talk about are some of our communication strategies. We've developed a variety of ways to communicate with new and beginning farmers in the county, utilizing our partners' networks. Farmers, first of all, they participate in monthly or have the ability to participate monthly in Food Equity Council meetings, as well as during additional work group meetings. The university's Ag Marketing Program sends regular email communications to producers in the county regarding trainings, regulations, marketing and farm management tools, among other things. It's also used as a channel for Food Equity Council's relevant action alerts and surveys. Farmers frequently contact me as the Ag Marketing Specialist, as well as the Farm Bureau President, and together we triage requests and include Food Equity Council if farmers have advocacy needs. The director of the Food Equity Council, City, has shared office space with myself at the Soil Conservation District, and this is great because it provides us a venue for regular communication, among the 3 organizations. We make a point to take advantage of other partners' networks to meet farmers where they are. This includes surveying farmers at Farm Bureau meetings, extension events, and other local beginning farmer training programs, just to name a few. And finally, we use high-profile events to highlight farmers' issues. This could be testifying in front of county council or their planning board, or inviting farmers and other knowledgeable experts to speak at our annual Food Equity Forum, which Sydney will talk about in a bit more detail later. But for the moment, I'm going to turn it back over to Sydney.
Thanks, Kim. So now Kim and I are going to share a brief overview of a few of FEC's advocacy accomplishments that have supported new and beginning farmers. It's worth mentioning that policy change is a very slow process and that we took a significant amount of time to build the relationships we needed to be successful advocates. I mentioned earlier that our county's urban farming legislation was very restricted when we first launched. Our county council was initially hesitant to allow urban farming in the county. However, there was a well-known and respected nonprofit with the mission of feeding the community and educating residents on healthy foods and lifestyles that wanted to start an urban farm on the property of an apartment complex serving low-income residents. As a result of their advocacy, County Council passed legislation to allow this one, and only this one, urban farm to break ground and operate in the county. In 2015, we were able to work with our partners to pass an urban agriculture property tax credit to start opening up the possibility of expanding urban farming. This tax credit is intended to support folks who are growing significant amounts of product on their lands, either for market or educational purposes. It's not for backyard gardeners. Of course, due to zoning restrictions, only one urban farm could receive the tax credit, and they were a nonprofit, so they weren't too interested. To ensure farmers could access the tax credit, in 2016, we worked with County Council to pass a bill that opened up urban farming to residential zones and zones where agriculture is already permitted in the county. The urban farm definition allows existing urban farms that have been operating in a legal gray area to come into the light and operate legally. And it also creates a pipeline for existing farms and new urban farmers to receive technical assistance from county agencies and nonprofit partners, as well as access other important resources like the tax credit and grants. As a result of this legislation, 73% of all land, about 3/4, in the county is zoned for urban farming, which we think is extremely exciting. So now I'll hand it over to Kim to talk about our county's new urban farming program, which was created to support farmers after this legislation passed.
So to ensure that new urban farmers are fully supported, we launched the County Urban Farm Initiative known as Bloom and PGC. We kicked off this initiative at our 2016 Food Equity Forum and used this event to generate publicity around the new legislation and also invited speakers and agricultural service providers to share resources on how to get started. The program, Bloom and GC, provides wraparound services, including an online resource hub, as well as in-person support and consultations from farmers learn where to get support on a variety of topics, including soil and water conservation plans, soil testing, marketing, business planning, navigating regulations and advocacy support, and also funding for infrastructure such as hoop houses. It's nice because it's a one-stop shop for an urban farmer to get step-by-step guidance on starting and sustaining a business in Prince George's County. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other legislation that we've worked on affecting the marketing of farm products for new and beginning farmers. At one point, agritourism operations in the county could not secure the necessary permits for signs to direct customers to their farms, which is a problem. And that's because farmers in our county do not need a building permit for their agricultural buildings. However, a signage permit is predicated upon a building permit. So we worked with a local vineyard and our Farm Bureau on developing an agritourism sign bill to address these challenges. This new legislation now allows agritourism operations to have permanent signs as well as temporary signs as far away as 20 miles from their farm. And they can have the temporary signs up for about 180 days, which is great. We worked with our local health department to create a sampling permit for farmers participating in farmers markets. So for $25 a season, farmers can cut whole produce and provide samples to their customers. And recently, the permit has been expanded to include cooking demos and select value-added farm products. We worked on other regulations that support marketing channels for farmers, including decreasing permit fees for farmers markets, increasing the operating hours and days of markets, funding for SNAP acceptance, and technology markets. Finally, we've been working to better engage our county's Economic Development Corporation through a roundtable discussion and other communications and events. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sydney to talk about land use and long-term planning.
So the final advocacy priority I'll discuss is the workarounds, like Kim said, land use and long-term planning documents affecting farmers. We focused our advocacy efforts around two documents, our county's zoning ordinance rewrite and the county's resource conservation plan. For a little background, the zoning ordinance codifies what the built environment looks and feels like and what can be developed and how in a county. Our county's current ordinance is 50 years old. It's very dated and it's very burdensome to navigate, and it's very much in need of an update. The county's resource conservation plan combines elements of green infrastructure planning, rural character, and agricultural conservation into one large national master plan. For these plans, we provided expert feedback, testimonies, a tour of urban agricultural sites, and model language for ordinance uses and definitions in 3 bucket areas related to agriculture. Around farmer support services and infrastructure, we provided model language on food hubs, examples of what local and regional agritourism operations look like, and in-person tours to show planners what structures like fencing look like around community gardens and farms to ensure that the language they write provides enough height for fences and the right sort of materials are allowed so that farmers can keep pests and deer from coming in and damaging their crops. Around value-added production, we looked at microbreweries and distilleries and provided model language around those. And we've also done a lot of work around animal processing. It's very important to us that farmers raising livestock are able to process their animals close to home to both minimize stress on the animal and the amount of time that they are away from their farm, maximizing their profit. And finally, we've done a lot of advocacy around urban agriculture. As I mentioned earlier, we provided tours of urban farms and community gardens to make a case for the value of urban ag and for more public land to be made available for urban ag leases. We've provided guidance and examples of how underutilized warehouses can be used for food production. We provided a tour of a site with small and intermediate scale composting, which of course is important for communities and for farmers so that they can compost food and farm waste close to where they live and work. Our advocacy on the zoning ordinance rewrite and resource conservation plan is ongoing, so we hope to have good news to report back when these plans are finalized. So with that, we will quickly recap some of the strategies we've used so far to successfully work with new and beginning farmers, and I will let Kim kick off the list.
So one of the most important things is when you can't go to where farmers already hear their concerns, research the communication channels, important people, and strategies for getting in touch with them, and use those channels. Don't feel like you need to build something new. Also, it's important to develop strong relationships and buy-in in your work through identifying and actively working on mutually beneficial goals with partners.
To address the concerns of beginning farmers, you really need champions for them within your council, and you need external allies in elected positions and decision-making positions within local government agencies and departments. It's really never too early to start building those relationships, and they take quite a bit of time and investment to get off the ground. We found it was very important for us to identify low-hanging fruit, or easy wins early on in our life. It allowed our members to accomplish something tangible in the short term, and it also encouraged them to stay engaged, which is very important. And finally, that reinforced our credibility as a Food Policy Council, and we were able to claim successes early, which helped us build allies and seek funding. Finally, we use our annual event, the Food Equity Forum, to highlight innovations, successes, and challenges in the county's food system, and it's been a very good forum to highlight local farmers. We've done this each year since we started. And last year, as Kim mentioned, we devoted our entire forum to our Bloomin' PGC program and to really show what urban farming did and could look like in the county. This provided a great opportunity to use our high-profile event to elevate the voice of new and beginning farmers and to educate stakeholders and decision makers on their concerns and priorities. So with that, we will wrap up. That's it for us. If you have any questions about anything we presented, we're happy to answer in the Q&A, or feel free to email us or contact us on social media. Thanks.
Great, and with that, we'll move over to you, Eric, with the National Young Farmers Coalition. Are you able to scroll through?
Hello. I think I can. Does that change it on your screen too?
Let's see. Try again. Do one more. Yep, it's working.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Sannerud. I am a farmer in Minnesota, central Minnesota. Foley is the largest town. We're about an hour and a half from the Twin Cities. I grow hops for beer, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Central Minnesota Young Farmers Coalition, what we do, who we are, what we were able to accomplish, and hopefully it creates some, while we're not like a food network, I hope that it creates some ideas for policy action with the work that all y'all are up to. So the Central Minnesota Young Farmers Coalition, or CMNYFC, is a chapter of the National Young Farmers Coalition. A lot of our members, although we're usually not that like squished together. Usually we're a little more spread out. Our aspect ratio isn't perfect on this photo. We started in 2016, and we started because we felt like there's so there are a lot of groups working on sustainable agriculture in Minnesota. I assume similar to the states that you guys are all operating in, but none of the groups that were operating for sustainable agriculture in Minnesota were advocating for beginning farmers. They all supported beginning farmers, you know, and if you ask a subset of the American population, yeah, you bet we support beginning farmers. But there's a big difference between supporting beginning farmers and advocating for beginning farmers. And so we found our desire to get started by wanting to advocate, wanting to be beginning farmers, advocating for beginning farmers. We meet at local tap rooms like that. We also have some social events primarily targeted around farm tours and potlucks at each other's farms. None of this is extremely groundbreaking. We do some workshops. So we hosted a farm service agency workshop about beginning farmer loans. But then we also are extremely active in policy. There we are at a farm tour, and here we are testifying at the state level. We started doing this policy work because we thought we saw it as being critical as far as advocating for beginning farmers to advocate for policies for beginning farmers. We did that using existing relationships that many of us had with organizations who work on policy at the state level, including Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, and other active local groups. And we quickly found that our energy that we bring to beginning farmers issues and our organizing strategy was very effective. So our organizing strategy is kind of based around two main tenets, and one of them being that we're beginning farmers advocating for beginning farmers. So we bring authenticity and passion that if you're not a beginning farmer, you simply I think this is an interesting note of contemporary organizing. If you're active in organizing, you would understand that. So for me, for example, I'm a white man. I wouldn't go to a Black Lives Matter protest and start to talk about like I know what the problem is, or really do anything besides participate. In the food system, we have folks who are not farmers, and especially not beginning farmers, doing a lot of policy work on our behalf, and it's not authentic, and it's also not the most powerful way to make that change. So we said, we're beginning farmers, we're going to advocate for beginning farmers. This is how we believe organizing and advocacy should work in 2017. And it wasn't happening in Minnesota. And then secondly, if that stance is maybe a little progressive or edgy, our other stance is just as old as dirt, and that's that we're a big tent organization. We're extremely pragmatic, and you can be a member if you farm 1 billion acres of corn and soybeans, if you have 18,000 cattle in 1 acre space, or if you grow vegetables, or if you grow weird shit like me. It really doesn't matter. We have big tent policy. Any farmer is welcome to be a member, and we have a very distinct pragmatic strategy that comes out of that. Because beginning farmers policy issues have not been worked on with great success in our country yet, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to go after. We don't need to be out on either fringe of either side of issues making a lot of enemies. We can sit in the middle and say, hey, here's a common sense idea that I don't know why no one has passed yet, but here it is, and let's go for it. So we've had a lot of success being that we can advocate authentically because we're beginning farmers, advocating for beginning farmers, and because we run with a big tent. We look first to make friends and work with people who disagree with each other and make them work with us. Because we have, we had one policy issue at the state level this year, and we were successful. So we passed a bill called the Minnesota Beginning Farmer Tax Credit. The way that bill worked was, very simply the way that bill works is that it gives a tax credit to an existing landowner when they sell to a beginning farmer. So it's pretty straightforward. It's an elegant solution. It's a win-win for both sides. We modeled this after the Iowa and Nebraska laws. However, there's a critical piece that's different about ours that really brings ours to the next level. And that's that in Iowa and Nebraska and some other states have similar versions of this law, you would only receive a tax credit if you rented that land or asset to a beginning farmer, not for the sale of that asset to a beginning farmer. And when we're looking at an issue, we want to create systemic change. And when we start to incentivize the sale of ag assets to the next generation, from the existing generation to the next generation, we're actually starting to address systemic level issues and systemic barriers to new people entering agriculture, and for those looking to transition their land from the current operator to another agricultural operator. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on this issue. We weren't the only organization pushing for it. However, this passed because of our energy, because of our testimony, because of the power that we brought being authentic voices for our own issues at the Capitol. It's exciting for us to see this bill happen in Minnesota. It's been about 10 years in the works, other organizations trying and failing to get this passed and get this even out of committee. So it's exciting for us to have our organizing strategy and our theory of change be validated, at least in this instance. And beyond that, we have seen and heard a lot of energy and a lot of interest for similar style bills at the federal level. And I think that that would be really beyond our wildest dreams to have this spark something that large. And finally, I think I want to talk about how that success has enabled our group to think broadly about what our future is. So having that success with this historic bill has really created a lot of legitimacy for our group. So all of a sudden we have regular meetings with state legislators. We have official voice on a seat of the Department of Agriculture, one of their main advisory boards. We have received coverage in all sorts of different press outlets, and generally it gave us the opportunity to double down and continue on this theory of change that we're operating over. So we're hoping to form some soft coalitions in our state to work on beginning farmer issues come to the next session. And perhaps most importantly, it's created a significant sense of group cohesion in the Central Minnesota Young Farmers Coalition, which is truly less than 30 folks in an active way, and probably only about 15 of us worked really hard on this bill. So it's extremely exciting for me to be a part of this kind of grassroots power building. And as an organization, we don't have a bank account, we don't get grants, we don't fundraise. We simply work on issues that we think are ripe for the picking, no like farm pun intended, and something that we see as a win-win for folks across agriculture in our state. That's what I was going to talk about today. You can follow up with us there. Otherwise, I'll look forward to answering your questions during the Q&A.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Annie.
Hi, thanks so much. Okay, you seeing those slides switch now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Annie Heuscher. I'm the Program Director of the Community Food and Agriculture Coalition. We're based in Missoula, Montana. And we're a small nonprofit. We have 6 full-time employees and a wide array of volunteers and interns. And I'm sure, like many of you, we consider our work to be really farm to table. So we work on conserving farmland through our I Like Ag and My Culture program. We support beginning farmers through our Farmland program. And we work on ensuring that all have access to healthy food through a Double SNAP Dollars program. And then we partner and work with other organizations to connect the dots across the rest of the work of creating a vibrant local food system. Some of our work is specific to the county level, but our beginning farmer work is statewide, so we have kind of a ranging geographic focus. And we were started through a community food assessment that was a really large-scale community food assessment done by the university and a lot of other community partners in 2005. And we operate as an independent nonprofit. As Karen mentioned earlier, we have a very diverse board and really take the coalition part of our name seriously in how we manage our work. And we started with a few government members, ex officio board members, but as we became more politically active, we also became more independent and kind of stepped away from that. So, and I'm going to talk really briefly about our farmland conservation work because our beginning farmer work really came directly out of this work on farmland conservation. So we live in an area that has a lot of farmland that was experiencing rapid development. And there's very few regulations. We have no zoning regulations and on a county-wide basis in Missoula County. And across most of the state, I think there are only 2 or 3 counties that have county-wide zoning. So it's a pretty tough regulatory environment to try and get policies approved. But so we worked on subdivision review, and we were present through a lot of policy development and revisions and updates. And ultimately wrote a white paper on all of the farmland that had been lost. And the culmination of that was our focus on having focus on developing regulations for what we call development supported agriculture, so that if people were developing agricultural land, that they needed to preserve at least a portion of that land in perpetuity. And it was really challenging work. We live in a place with very strong anti-regulation sentiments, as I'm sure there are in many of your areas. And also there is a strong prevalence of this idea that there aren't any farmers anymore, and that there won't be. There's no point in preserving agricultural land in our area. You know, the Missoula area is surrounded by quite a few narrow valleys that have forest all around them, and we don't have very many, 2,000 acre parcels that can allow people to compete on a commodity basis on a large national scale. And so those remaining farmers that were still producing commodity crops were saying, there are no farmers, and so why would you do that? And we knew that there were beginning farmers and that they were being successful, and so we wanted to start transitioning into doing what we could to support them. And so a lot of our work with beginning farmers is actually much more program-oriented than policy-oriented. So we started out with getting a grant from Risk Management Agency through the Risk Management Education Partnerships Program. And since then, we've gotten funding through the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program to offer business planning workshops. So we do farm planning workshops on marketing and financial planning and financing, risk management in the winter, and we offer those across the state. And then we offer our farmer field days are on-farm, farmer-led, production-oriented events that are held throughout the summer. And we've hosted almost 60 workshops with over 800 producers. Of those, 64% have had limited financial resources and 20% were socially disadvantaged. So that's been pretty exciting for us. And on the screen are the locations where we've hosted our business planning workshops so far. We've done in 8 locations so far and have another 6 planned this winter, hopefully partnering with a number of our Indian reservations in Montana. So that has been really successful. And through the business planning series, we recognize that as across the country, that farmland, access to farmland is a huge issue, which we knew already through our work on farmland conservation. And so we expanded our Land Link program statewide through the FarmLink Montana website, which is at farmlinkmontana.org, and it has 30 or 40 pages of resources to help people get started, and then tools to connect with on-farm employment, land, and mentorship. And we, had pretty minimal expectations about the website when we started it, and we've had 68,000 page views by more than 10,000 users since late 2015. So we're really pleased with how the site's been being used, and especially how people are using it to connect with the resources and and employment and land around the state. And we also recognize the challenge that a lot of the farmers that we were working with had around accessing financing. So we started by becoming a Kiva trustee, which is, if anyone hasn't heard of Kiva, I would strongly recommend looking into it. It's been really successful, and the farmers that we've worked with around here have really liked using Kiva loans. They're crowd-funded loans, so it's like Kickstarter, but it's loan-based rather than donation-based. And it's up to $10,000 and with 0% interest and no fees. So it's can be a really fantastic piece of a part of the financing puzzle. And so far in the last 6 months, we've had 5 farmers use that program, and they've raised $34,000, and all have raised really quickly. So that's been really great. We developed a program with our State Department of Agriculture and the USDA Specialty Crop Program to develop mini grants for specialty crop producers in Montana that are up to $5,000, and we've granted out nearly $80,000 in grants through that program, which there was a lot of a lot of educational process for us in learning how to develop and manage a mini grant program. Happy to answer questions on any of those pieces. And then we developed a cooperative agreement with the Farm Service Agency. One of the things that we had noticed was that a lot of the people that we were working with were small scale, diversified, organic, vegetable, lots of different kinds of producers, but producers that weren't the traditional Montana cattle, hay, and grain operations. And so they were hearing a lot of mistruths about how FSA loans could be used from the community and sometimes from different agency folks. And so we partnered with FSA to do outreach and one-on-one technical assistance on their loan program. So we've been working with people one-on-one to do help with their business planning, marketing, market research, financial management, and to get them prepared to walk through the door of the Farm Service Agency. And so we've worked with more than 40 farmers to provide one-on-one technical assistance, and it's been really fulfilling to be able to get people to start using those resources and get people through the door who sometimes, in the past maybe wouldn't have even thought of FSA. So that's been really great. And then in the coming next couple of years, we're also going to be expanding that to, there's very few people in Montana working with beginning farmers, so we're going to be building a network of beginning farmer service providers and hosting annual retreats to expand the knowledge and capacity of other people around the state who are working with farmers. There's been a big interest in investing in farmland and in farms, and so we're going to be working with investors and farmers and investment professionals around the state to kind of produce some guidelines and options and help to connect people with tools to be able to do that. And then, as always, we're working on the sustainability of our own program. So as a food policy council, I think one of the things that makes us unique is that we traditionally have started a lot of programs and then spun them off to the appropriate organization. And so I don't necessarily know that all of these programs will stay in-house at the Community Food and Ag Coalition in perpetuity. There's a good chance that if Extension wants to take over hosting those workshops, which we've been partnering with them to do them so far, if they wind up wanting to take those over, we would probably be thrilled to transfer it over to them. So trying to figure out some of the sustainability of these programs and where they're best suited, and making sure that those institutions are ready and excited about expanding their beginning farmer work. So hoping to grow capacity around the state. They asked us to talk a little bit about our structure, and as a food policy council, we are very committee driven in our work across the board. On the beginning farmer side of things, we have a 14-member committee, 12 of whom are actively farming. And we meet in person certain times of the year. We meet over the phone in the really busy times of the year, sometimes more sporadically, sometimes more regularly. And so far, this committee has primarily helped us to develop and refine our programs. So helping us to determine workshop topics and help us to build those programs up. But there's definitely starting to be more of an interest in policy. One of the challenges in Montana is that our legislature meets every other year for 4 months. So there's a long lag time where it's hard to keep people excited and motivated about policy at the state level, but then it's super intense during the time when the legislature is happening. So that's definitely something that we're always working on, refining how we keep people engaged in that process. We partner with another organization in the state, the National Sustainable Agricultural, the Alternative Energy Resources Organization, to participate in NSAC, the National Sustainable Ag Coalition. And so that helps us to get the word out about federal policy action items to our members. And then at the state level, as Eric mentioned, property taxation has been a huge issue. There is some interest at our state legislature to change the way ag properties are valued for tax purposes, and so we've been working on ways to address that and be present at the legislature during those conversations. And I would just say that even though our work has been primarily focused on programs through over the last few years, that developing these programs has given us access and legitimacy in the policy arena. So, when we're coming to the table, we're saying, we work with farmers. We know that there are beginning farmers out there. We can get them to the table if needed, and it's allowed us to develop better relationships with other policy makers and other policy organizations to be at that table. So that is, I think, all that I had, and I will pass it back to Bree for questions.
Thanks so much, Annie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat box quite yet, but I'd encourage you to go ahead and send your questions along. While we do that, I guess I want to kind of throw out a question to everyone. Basically, I'm imagining folks that might be on this webinar that work for the audience that I work with, so beginning farmer training organizations with, that are stretched pretty thin, but do feel like it's important to become involved somehow in the local food policy efforts in their area. Can you just talk a little bit more about, I guess I think this might be best for the Prince George's folks, but how the programs that work directly with farmers interact with the work that you do, and what a good entry point might be for someone who's working for an incubator farm and interested in entering this space?
Sure. This is Sydney from the FEC. And I'll definitely rely heavily on Kim here, too, because she works really one-on-one with a lot of our farmers. We were lucky that some of the organizations that work with beginning farmers, especially urban farmers, engaged with us early on and actually helped to launch the council. So I think we're a little bit spoiled in that way. We always had that input there. But something that we've done that I think has been really helpful in connecting us to beginning farmers is working with the organizations that they're already a part of. So we have a very strong relationship with our local farm bureau, and we also have a strong relationship with our soil conservation district office. And we'll often meet with them to sort of get some feedback on what they're hearing from beginning farmers, or go to meetings that they'll be hosting to connect with them directly. So I guess I would, in summary, encourage new and beginning farmers to encourage the organizations they're already a part of to connect with the Food Council on their behalf, as they don't have time to do it.
And I might just add that, the extension, it's really nice having someone involved in extension on the Food Policy Council, because there are a lot of resources in extension. For UMD Extension, we have the Beginning Farmer Success Program. We do Annie's Project, which is a farm management business program for beginning women farmers. So, we have a host of programs and projects that are specifically targeted towards new and beginning farmers just within extension. So it's nice to be able to funnel our Prince George's County producers into that. The other thing I was going to say is most of our counties in the state of Maryland have either an ag marketing specialist or an agricultural economic development officer. And that's a nice entry point for a lot of our new and beginning farmers as well. Oftentimes we're the first point of contact, and then we can sort of help plug in new and beginning farmers into all of the resources that are in our particular counties as well as at the state level.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we do have another question here. Let me pull it up. So this is a question for Annie. How do you manage to engage that many farmers, 12 farmers, on your board? Farmers often do not have a lot of time for extraneous activities, so how do you engage farmers in the coalition? What is the time commitment to serve on the council?
Yeah, we have a couple of beginning farmers who are on our board, one or two, but the rest are just involved through a committee that's much more focused just exclusively on the beginning farmer issues. So I think that makes it more meaningful for them. We've switched to doing an every other month meeting, and so we do it in person from November through April, and then we do it over the phone from May through October. And we definitely see attendance drop off in the summer, but we try and make our calls and our meetings as action oriented, and we spend as little time as possible giving them updates, just enough to make sure that they know what's going on and can help us promote with their network, but really spend most of the time focused on utilizing their expertise. And what I've heard back from them is that they are mostly people who've participated in our programs in one way or another, and so they already have an understanding of what we do and have seen the benefit of it on a personal level. And a lot of them really want to give back and feel like they've benefited a lot. So, yeah.
Great, thank you, Annie. We have time for a couple more questions if they're out there. If not, there'll be a follow-up email sent with a survey for you to evaluate this webinar, as well as contact presenters and myself if you have continuing questions about this. So we'll give another minute for questions if they're coming, and then if not, we'll close out. All right, we do have one more question here. The question is, has anyone done work on developing more market opportunities within communities? The Double Up program at farmers markets is great, but with an increase in farmers, we are finding that our community is nearly at saturation point in terms of the limited number of purchasers. Ideas for local food marketing campaigns or motivation for business owners to buy local? Any thoughts on that?
This is Kim with the Prince George's Food Equity Council. Some of the things that we do, ag marketing specialists, as I mentioned, in the state sort of communicate with one another. So oftentimes, if there is a particular need, we will go ahead and sort of like funnel requests amongst each other's channels. And also each of us sort of, has our own, marketing and development campaign just to residents to educate them on the benefits of eating local. And, a lot of us have websites that help connect residents and also, our partners and stakeholders to farms and, to get them to those places so they can be directly in contact and communication with them.
This is Annie in Missoula, and I would just add that we have mostly partnered with folks to do that element of it. We have a fantastic food hub here in Missoula that is a farmer-owned cooperative that does aggregation, marketing, and distribution. And they partner really closely with a food processing center that is a cooperative community kitchen. So people can go in and make value-added products there, but they also have in-house staff who process a lot of vegetables to make local food available to institutions. So that's been a big way that we've expanded marketing in this state, in our region. And then we have conversations at the statewide level right now about doing research and statewide marketing of basically the benefits of local food. So definitely something that we're working on, but don't have a lot of programs under our belt right now.
Great, thank you. And it looks like there is another question here. So for those of you who work on new and beginning farmer land access, what further possibilities do you see or dream about for transitioning current farmland to the next generation? Do you think we need a system of land management, especially since easements are not currently sufficient for making land financially accessible for new farmers?
This is Annie again. I can take a stab at that. Man, there's so many good ideas out there. I think, you know, some of the things that I've been thinking about lately are how we, as you say, that oftentimes conservation easements can take the value off of a property to a certain extent, but can't get it down to the level that a beginning farmer can afford to purchase. And so there are programs like, I believe Equity Trust has a project where they've, you know, some states have developed grant programs that can further reduce the property value down to ag value. There's a cooperative in Alberta that has basically done local fundraising similar to a community foundation, and then they say, you know, as a community foundation, one of our goals is to have young people and young families in our community, and so it's a community value to us to do that, and so they are paying the difference, you know, to make a beginning farmer viable and able to access that price. And then there are folks like, oh, I'm forgetting the name, but there's a financing and investing group in that's been operating in New York that does, they will buy the land as a group of investors, lease it to a beginning farmer at the property at the rate that they can do, and then over a time frame of 10 to 15 years, will increase the lease gradually up to the level that it would be if they went out and bought a loan for the property, got a loan for the property, and then at that point in time, the farmer buys it from the investors. And I'm happy to look up that name and send it out if that's helpful. But there's definitely some great ideas out there, and I haven't seen a one-size-fits-all fix, but it's a huge challenge. I'm interested to hear what other folks have been thinking about.
Any other thoughts on the land access for new and beginning farmers from presenters?
Hi, this is Eric from Central Minnesota Young Farmers Coalition. I think that the playing with taxes is a really nice lever that has a lot of different nuances that can be used with it to target it to certain areas, types of farms, benefits. I think it's elegant in that, at least for the adjudicated, or like the section being governed, it's like a flat thing, and so you get it passed, and now we're all here. So if it's a state level tax, then we're all, everyone in the state is playing by those rules, which I think it's difficult to do new farmer or a young farmer like land transitions like at a smaller when you get to a certain small amount of scale, you end up with a space where you just don't have the right land or enough of the right land for what farmers are interested in doing. And so obviously to have more farmers on the land, there needs to be land that they want to be on. And so I think that for me, like state level policy is obviously where I put my time, and that's maybe a bias. Like my perspective is pretty biased, but I see that as like a really powerful space to engage.
Great. Well, thank you to all of our presenters. If these are the ends of questions, and we'll go ahead and wrap up. And thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to attend, especially if there are any farmers out there. We know it's a busy time, and we appreciate all you're doing. So thanks again to our presenters, and please be in touch if If there's anything else you'd like to follow up on, we'll go ahead and send an evaluation survey to all attendees, as well as the presentation and a link to the recording. Hopefully we'll have that out by end of day tomorrow. So thanks so much, everyone.